everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Making a Difference in Mental Health. I'm your host, Danielle Young, with my co-host, Wendy Grier. Today, we're continuing on with our resources series, and we have a very special guest with us today, Mrs. Ellie Lewis Park, who is the Outreach and Programs Coordinator for University of Maryland SAFE Center. But before we begin with Mrs. Lewis Park, I want to say hi to my co-host. Hey, Wendy. How you doing?
Hey, Danielle. How are you? Hi, audience. How's everybody doing? I'm so excited today to have Miss Ellie Lewis Park with us. As you know, when we were together the last time, I hinted about we were going to be talking about child sex trafficking. Mm-hmm. And I said, a very strong word about it being very tragic incidents that occur with children. And it is a tragic topic, but it's a topic that we really need to talk about and continue to talk about. So I'm super happy that Ellie had a chance to sit with us today and bring light to this subject. How are you doing, Ellie?
I'm very well and very thankful to be here with both of you today. Thank you for inviting me.
No worries. We're so happy that you're here and you had time out of your schedule to sit with us and talk about this very important topic. So, Ellie, you're with the University of Maryland SAFE Center program for survivors of human trafficking. That's amazing. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got involved with this program?
Yes, so I first heard of the SAFE Center for Human Trafficking Survivors when it launched at the University of Maryland in 2016. At that point, I was a student at the university and was very invested in the anti-trafficking movement, and particularly for the communities in Maryland and for communities that are being affected by both sex and labor trafficking. So when I found that the SAFE Center was interested in investing in our community to provide support as well as advocacy and research to help survivors of both sex and labor trafficking to heal and reclaim their lives, I felt really called to participate and support in any way that I could. So I started at the SAFE Center in 2017, first as an AmeriCorps Vista, supporting in the development of their economic empowerment program. And after that, I transitioned on into a communications role and am now there full-time as an outreach and program coordinator, specifically working with the communities in Montgomery and Prince George's County to understand how to identify trafficking of all forms in various community serving organizations and agencies, to be able to connect survivors to resources, as well as, with the long-term goal of equipping our community with the protective factors that can help prevent trafficking long-term.
Great. Can you elaborate a little bit about the acronym SAFE? What does that stand for?
So SAFE stands for Support, Advocacy, Freedom, and Empowerment Center for Human Trafficking Survivors. Core to our mission from the beginning has been understanding that survivors' needs are manifold and often, vary from survivor to survivor. So being able to provide trauma-informed and survivor-centered services that would meet, the varying needs all in one location was very important to the SAFE Center. So we provide a comprehensive service model that works with multidisciplinary teams to provide case management, legal services that include immigration and also crime victims' rights, legal advocacy. We also provide behavioral health services, both individual and group therapy. We have an economic empowerment program that supports survivors in finding education and employment opportunities that will ensure that their long-term career goals are met, as well as ensuring that they're not re-exposed to exploitation. And we also have a crisis intervention program that responds to the needs of our current clients, as well as potential survivors that are being identified after hours and also in emergency situations.
Wow, that is excellent. A lot of good things happening. Danielle, your thoughts?
Yes, I'm just listening here, and I do hear a lot of services that are provided for those who either happen to be victims or those who are designed to be survivors and needing resources. But I wonder, Ellie, what type of person, whether it be a young girl or if it's a young boy, what type of person, just for us as clinicians and those who want to be advocates, what type of persons would you see coming into your services that have been trafficked? Because I know that you said that you identify trafficking in all types of forms and you connect survivors with services, but what type of person would you say fits a criteria?
Absolutely. So trafficking can technically impact anybody of any age, nationality, gender, sexual identity. And that is something that the Safe Center understands, and therefore our services are open to all audiences. However, we do see primarily at the Safe Center that a disproportionate percentage of our client population are women, both adults and minors, and women and girls of color. So we do understand that trafficking is impacting those communities, as well as we have a very high population of immigrant clients who, some of whom came to the US with documentation and some who did not. So we understand that, generally we're seeing that marginalized communities are being placed at risk to trafficking, whether that is because of racism or xenophobia or general climates of toxicity and hatred towards these communities that place them in a position where they're not being connected to the resources that they deserve or that they have been promised. So whether that be by the community, the government systems, any safety net is not working in this situation to protect those communities from being targeted. So we also know that we see a lot of youth in our programs that are, system involved or potentially runaway youth as well. This is reflecting the stats that have come out from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children that 1 in 6 of endangered runaways have the potential to have been victimized by trafficking. So our client population and what we see in those situations with youth certainly reflects that reality back. We generally know that impoverished communities, especially during COVID with financial insecurity, as well as social isolation, has increased individuals' potential to be targeted and exploited by a trafficker, individuals that may not know their employment rights, their labor rights, and may not understand that labor can be, with that trafficking doesn't just involve sex, it can involve labor situations as well. Does that answer your question?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that you've given just a little more insight to it, too, with your last statement that trafficking does not just include sex, but it also includes the labor. And you've kind of let us know even socioeconomic status can be a factor as well as race and gender and even citizenship status. And I find that to be very interesting. I want to know, though, what are the impacts on males? Could you let our audience know, are there any statistics or is there any information about males being trafficked?
Absolutely. I'm really glad that you brought this up because the Safe Center, we do provide services to male identifying clients, but they are they represent a very small portion of our client population, and historically male identifying individuals have represented a small percentage of trafficking survivors who have been identified. And so while, some may conclude that this means men and boys aren't being trafficked, we would shy away from, affirming that conclusion, because we also understand that there are varying factors, whether it be shame or guilt or lack of understanding of trafficking in the labor sector, or sex trafficking and sexual abuse of minors can escalate to the level of trafficking. And we haven't historically done a very good job of ensuring that the public is aware that this is something that impacts men and boys as well. So victims being able to identify that what they're experiencing is trafficking is very challenging. So we can show you that the numbers are, smaller in our client population, but that doesn't necessarily mean to us that men and boys aren't being trafficked as often.
Absolutely. Ellie, I'm so happy you pointed that out, because my audience knows that my background is in child welfare, and so specifically child protective services. And so we would have this discussion about the percentage of girls being sexually abused versus boys being sexually abused. And although it might not be reported as much, the rate of it, but it's occurring more than people think. So I think it connects with what you said with sex trafficking, whether it is the sexual piece or the labor piece, it's probably happening at a higher rate, but just not getting reported.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that. Absolutely. And so you talked to us a little bit about some statistics in the DMV around sex trafficking. I'm curious to know, what does it look like to different groups of people? Does it cross socioeconomic lines? Does it cross racial lines? You did indicate to us that women of color and immigrant women are more likely at this point to be trafficked. So I'm just wondering what other bits of information you can share with the audience regarding any stereotypes about trafficking that you may have encountered.
Absolutely. I think, to clarify from the beginning, I know this is something that you probably know, Wendy, but commonly isn't necessarily understood amongst broad audiences due to lack of information or misinformation that's being put out there. But trafficking, and particularly sex trafficking, when we're talking about youth, the definition of sex trafficking of a minor simply means that any minor, anyone under the age of 18 that is engaging in commercial sex, so exchanging sexual acts for something of value, which could be money, drugs, housing, food. If a minor is engaging in commercial sex, they are by law considered a victim of trafficking due to their inability to consent to commercial sex. So
absolutely.
You don't technically need the proof of a trafficker or any relationship of force, fraud, or coercion, which are the usual defining factors of a trafficking situation that escalates sexual abuse or forced labor or labor exploitation to the level of a trafficking situation. So that right there kind of helps us understand that there's no such thing as, a child prostitute. Any youth that's engaged in commercial sex is being exploited by one person or another. And also understanding that this is something that doesn't just happen far away. It doesn't happen just to foreign countries or only immigrant individuals in the US or only children. This is not something that it's very rare that we see individuals being kidnapped or, chained in basements. These visual ideas that we see sometimes reflected in the media, sensationalized. It's much more about relationship, about need fulfillment, and about support systems not being able to come through to protect those individuals from being targeted and exploited by a trafficker. So a trafficker can be a family member, it can be an intimate partner, an employer. And so any group that has a need that must be fulfilled and is not being met by, the support systems that are meant to be there to protect them is placed at risk to being targeted by a trafficker. So, while yes, anyone of any socioeconomic status could be trafficked technically, everybody has needs. The communities that are being marginalized and oppressed and generally looked over by our society, by our systems, are the communities that we are most often seeing come through our doors and being identified as survivors. So I think it's important to note that, it's kind of easier at times for us to be alarmed about kidnapping and people being, chained and shuffled in white vans over the border, rather than really taking a hard look at our communities and saying, where are we failing our neighbors, and where are we missing the mark in ensuring that they have support systems that ensure that they understand their rights, they understand their value and their dignity, and they aren't placed in a position where a trafficker can take advantage of them.
So Ellie, in essence, you're saying it really doesn't matter your socioeconomic status, your racial status. It's all about, are you a vulnerable kid or a vulnerable young adult? And that's what these people prey on. The traffickers prey on. And I'm glad that I lived through child welfare. We watched the law change from looking at victims as not being victims, but as child prostitutes. And I know my colleagues and I struggled with that. That absolutely makes no sense if you look at the definition of sex abuse. So when the law changed and we finally were able to go after the trafficker and treat our girls, our victims, as victims, we were very delighted, very happy. It is a tough population to treat. So I'm glad to hear that your service also, looks at kids who are in the system. So when they're in the system, they're either with child welfare or DJS, Department of Juvenile Services. So that's a great resource. But yes, I think you hit the nail on the head about it's anybody really being vulnerable in the community and needs are not being fulfilled. That's the key. And this is what these people prey on. So thank you for that. That's a great summation of that information.
Absolutely.
Yes, and I just want to kind of continue on the conversation, as we already said, that it really is about the vulnerable child. And I like how you are just educating us on about the dynamics of the relationship, the need for fulfillment for some of these victims. And, I was thinking about the certain attachments. You'd mentioned something about sometimes traffickers can even be family members or can be friends or close to family. So it's about those healthy support systems, or maybe looking at the support systems to see the health of the support systems and to see if there's something that is outside of the standard of or the norm of what a healthy relationship looks like. And then also you said something that I think we had in another one of our episodes, sometimes about either the over exaggeration of even Hollywood, the way things look on TV may be a little bit more subtle. And so, I think I'm thankful for the education to our audience just about those signs to look for. Now, Ellie, I also want to know here, what are the mental health issues or impacts from some of the clients or some of those that come into your agency that are looking for assistance and that are looking for resources, either due to trafficking or to heal from that experience? What are some of the mental health challenges or issues that you happen to see?
Yes, so the Safe Center has joined in the trafficking community and really understanding and recognizing that trafficking is a form of trauma, and survivors of trafficking can face multiple, forms of trauma, historical trauma prior to their trafficking as well as following their trafficking. And so the manifestations of that trauma can be, anywhere from obviously PTSD or, addiction, depression, bipolar disorder, as well as, general high anxiety and panic attacks. So our behavioral health team works together to provide trauma-informed cognitive behavioral therapy and solution-focused therapy, to work with our clients on building self-confidence and self-esteem following being exploited and being having that confidence and self-esteem really being, utterly destroyed by their trafficking situation.
Ellie, you talked a little bit or a lot about when you were describing the Safe Center program and its model about how you address the mental health issues that your clients are facing. I love that you said your agency or organization is trauma informed. So for our audience members, what that really means is that any organization that serves clients from a mental health background come from a space of understanding the clients have been traumatized, and going through a trauma causes certain responses from a person, and that we as mental health providers are aware of, and we work around that to help a client heal. So I like that you all are trauma informed. You talked a little bit about your model is very comprehensive. You use behavioral health services. You provide economic support. Can you just highlight a little bit more of what you all do just for the audience? I'd like to just drive that point home because it sounds like it's such a wonderful program. I don't want anyone to miss your services.
Absolutely. So I think I failed to mention earlier that our services are all free to anyone that has been identified as the victim of trafficking. Definitely glad that we circled back to emphasize the fact that they're free. So any individual that meets the federal definition of trafficking, meaning that they were trafficked for sex or labor, can receive free services, as many as they choose, from the Safe Center. So certainly the case management support team that we have sits at the foundation of our services in connecting our clients to the public benefits that are available to trafficking survivors, as well as being the point of contact with the multiple agencies that are often invested or at some point, required to be involved in the client's case. We also, because of our situation in proximity to the University of Maryland, there are resources that our case management team is able to provide in coordination with the university, including primary medical care, as well as dental services. We also, as I mentioned, have a legal team, and because our clients are both foreign national and domestic survivors, we see cases where survivors have immigration legal needs, and due to the federal law, we're able to provide varying levels of immigration support, including a T visa, which allows our survivors of trafficking to live and work permanently in the United States and also bring their families here. And we also see clients that are criminalized for different activities that were related to their trafficking. So we have a crime victims' rights, legal advocacy arm of our legal program that works to help advocate for our clients through the criminal justice system, as well as connect them to varying legal remedies that can expunge and even vacate those convictions from their records. We do have our behavioral health team, and so our therapists provide the individual as well as some group therapy options. And this is really, we feel, is extremely critical to our survivors being able to continue accessing, the services that they need long term to be able to work through their trauma if they opt into therapy. So our staff are bilingual in English and Spanish to be able to meet those needs and communicate with each other through through all of these service aspects. And our economic empowerment program also focuses on ensuring that, as I mentioned, I think earlier, that survivors can have opportunities to build sustainable career paths and opportunities to support their families long term, especially considering that for some clients, their trafficking was related to their work history. So being able to identify their skills and transition to new industries, as well as find opportunities that are, full-time, not just part-time, and provide on-the-job training is very critical and something that our team focuses on very heavily. So all of these different teams work together. We have a multidisciplinary team model where, when clients are working with multiple programs, those programs are connecting with each other, ensuring that they are understanding the full picture and able to meet, the broader needs, as well as ensure that their program offerings are really informed about the client's vision and goals long term. So all of these programs are available, and whenever a client comes to the Safe Center, whether that be through a referral from community organizations or law enforcement or the National Human Trafficking Hotline, or just a self-referral of a client that has identified that they have experienced trafficking and would like support, they have the opportunity to opt in to any or all of these services, and their program plan is based off of their self-defined goals and needs.
Wow, thank you, Ellie. I'm also glad that we circled back so that you could provide that extra information. So for our audience, we want you to know that the Safe Center does provide free services. Ellie just let us know about individual, group therapy. We have multidisciplinary models. You have different interventions, CBT, trauma-informed. They're bilingual services. So I think that this is excellent. And before we go, Ellie, we have one more question for you. For those in our audience that are listening that want to support, that may be parents, that may be young persons, that may be caregivers, or those who just want to advocate, what type of tips would you give those in regards to this entire topic that we've been talking about today? And then also, before you end, just give us maybe a website or a phone number if they want to have that resource for them. So yeah, the floor is yours.
Yes, I think we've touched on this a little bit throughout our conversation, so I appreciate the opportunity to kind of just re-emphasize that education really is the first step to empowerment. And in terms of understanding how to support survivors, really taking the time to challenge the misconceptions that are often out there about who is a trafficking victim, what challenging these perfect victim ideas, and understanding that each individual has a backstory, and as I know is often the refrain, asking, not what's wrong with this person, but what happened to them is really key. And along that same line, for parents, while it may feel like a more concrete recommendation to say, track your children's online behaviors or social circles, really what we see as an effective tool in these situations is ensuring that you have a system of trust with your child, and where they are free to disclose situations to you without judgment or fear of any form of retaliation, and understanding that you are a safe space for them, as well as identifying, as we mentioned, where are their needs being met, and are those safe sources of need fulfillment, and connecting them and ensuring that they have understanding of healthy relationship dynamics. They're engaged in their school and programs, that you're youth and community members alike understand their workers' rights and have access to resources to understand that they're not alone in these situations, and that, if they're uncomfortable, they have an opportunity to speak out, which is all going to play a role in ensuring that traffickers are not able to freely exploit and target them and their needs. So I think in order to be able to understand what those needs look like and meet them, we have to really open our eyes to understand that trafficking is much more than the media makes it out to be oftentimes, and really our roles as community members in building up those protective factors in our neighborhoods and our circles can very much be a significant maker of impact on these communities that are, being exploited. So that takes work, and that takes self-reflection as well as, active engagement. But I really do think that can go so much further than we really can recognize. So I just want to encourage that. If you're interested in learning more about human trafficking or becoming involved with a local organization like the Safe Center, you can absolutely visit our website, which is www.umdsafecenter.org. And that is UMD stands for the University of Maryland Safe Center. So please do visit our website. There are resources on there about how to identify warning signs in your community, as well as resources for making referrals and connections to organizations that can support you. It's all listed right there.
Thank you. Wendy, what are your last thoughts before we end with Miss Ellie, and then let our audience know what's coming up next?
Sure. Ellie, again, thank you so much for joining us today and having this very important conversation. This is a topic that I know you and I could go for hours talking about, but I am happy that you've educated us, you're educating our audience, that our audience keeps sex trafficking in mind, that it's a tragic event that occurs in our community with our children, our young people. And so we need to be on top of it, and we need to be aware. I think I take away from just something very simple: creating safe spaces in your organization that's trauma informed, parents creating a safe space at home for their children so that there is communication flow, and that they get the support, and that the parents are tapped in, not only with technology and as you said, tracking, but actually tapping in with your children, seeing where they are emotionally, and making sure that you're a part of their day-to-day experience in life. And so I thank you for that. I thank you for coming and being a guest, and certainly you are welcome to come back again so I can sit and talk to you more about sex trafficking. As we move toward the end of our series on resources, part 1, because we're going to have a part 2 in October, but in part 1, our medical director, Dr. Leslie Baugh, is joining us again to talk about suicide. September is Suicide Prevention Month, and so she's going to give us some more knowledge and education about this topic that affects all of us. So I'm looking forward to having her back.
Well, thank you again, Miss Ellie Lewis Park, for your time and for providing us with so much insight and information today. I am your host, Danielle Young, with my co-host here with me, Wendy Grier. This is Making a Difference in Mental Health podcast, where we're always striving to make a difference in mental health. We will see you